you can call it off. Samsung have perfected it. We don't need any more flips. This is the flip's final form. This is peak Samsung. Welcome back to SamMobile TV. You're here with Daniel, and this is a review of the Galaxy Z Flip 6. We've had just over a week with it to sort of put together our thoughts and conclude what this flip is going to be about. I'm going to break it down into a few different categories because I think the flip can't just be defined by being a smartphone. There's different elements to it. So let's go through them. I want to start with the design because the flip is defined by its design. This is truly unique in how it looks and feels, but it hasn't changed in the 6 years or 5 years they've been making them. The concept is still the same. The only thing we get different this year is it's now more refined. We've got the flatter sides, which kind of make it feel a bit more premium to hold, especially the matte finish around the frame. And outside of that, the design is pretty much as is. This won't change how you use a flip because the concept hasn't changed. It's just more refined. But that sort of concept is that it's compact, and the compact nature of a flip, and especially the Flip 6, makes it a joy to use. One-handed use when it's closed is so easy and also convenient, and the small form factor makes it so much more pocketable, especially when compared to the S24 Ultra, which I have here. It's got a certain rigidity with the hinge about it when opening and sort of closing it. The hinge has been made a lot sturdier and seemingly more durable. But I noticed something in my sort of looking at the hinge, and that's the lack of symmetry. Yes, it is not symmetrical in its design around the hinge area. Let me explain. Right at the point, let's see if you can see it here, where the hinge sort of closes, there's a tiny little gap. And where the two halves of the phone meet, they're not symmetrical, they don't line up. And that also causes it at the lip of the phone, the bottom, for it also not to line up. There's a slight raise over the top half to the bottom half, almost like an overbite. What I attribute this to is Samsung making it easier to wedge your thumb underneath and open it up to sort of get some sort of traction there. It doesn't do a lot, but it probably in Samsung's mind does enough to allow it to be easier to open, especially with one hand. So if it's a design intention, I like where the head's at. If it's not meant to be like that, you can't unsee it once you see it. The opening does feel firm and strong, as I said, largely in part to this hinge. The hinge makes or breaks the flip phone, and it makes it here with the flip. The hinge being so solid allows Samsung to have that sort of uniqueness that no other phone can do, the utility of it that no other phone can match. But we'll get to that a little bit later. The last thing about the design that is different and that might change not how you use it, but how you feel about using it, is the crease. The crease is so much less prominent. And for a phone like the Flip, where it's actually more important for the crease to be less prominent than any other type of folding phone, it's very, very welcomed. Running your finger over the center of the crease feels way less sort of prominent as what it did before. Now let's talk about the camera. The camera has been long overdue for an upgrade on the Flip. Samsung has stuck by the dual 12 megapixel sensors for the longest time. So I'm so glad that they upped it to 50 on the main camera and brought in a new ultra wide alongside it, because it definitely does make the difference when you are using the Z Flip 6. For myself personally, I would like one extra camera, a telephoto of some kind, but I think, as we'll see in software, the 50 megapixel actually does a pretty good job at getting the 2, the 4, and even up to 10x zoom. As you can see here, with comparison to the Flip 5, those longer zoom ranges are actually benefited by that 50 megapixel sensor. So maybe the telephoto is not necessarily needed just yet anyway. Samsung can do a lot with the 50 megapixel. Before we get into the utility of the camera, because that's really where it shines, let's talk about the output. Briefly though, because this is more than output. The new camera plus with the new 8 Gen 3 for Galaxy brings with it some better processing. The photos are very well balanced, and skin tones I found, especially when taking photos of people, are much more accurate. Photo here of my son, you can see next to the Flip 5. The Flip 5 washed it out and my son looked pale. Whereas on the Flip 6, brought out his golden olive skin, being an Italian child that he is. Took a lot of different snaps in a lot of different modes. I used the cover screen a lot to preview my photo, which meant I was using the rear camera. And we noticed at SamMobile, the difference between the inner camera and the outer cameras, night and day. You can see here, it doesn't even make sense why you would take selfies using that inner camera when you've got the quality of the cameras on the rear or front, depending on how you take your photos. I experienced this myself when I went to a concert. Nighttime portrait selfies using the cover screen came out superb. Much prefer this option than using the inner camera, which is really only there for video calls, let's face it. But everything else I've sort of used with this camera has been perfectly acceptable. Processing's been nice. It's bringing out lighter shadows, which means you can see more of the photo. The video is really good as well. It captured some really nice video this weekend. So overall, I'm really, really pleased with the cameras on the Z Flip 6 and the output they give me. But that's not the story here. The story is the utility that these cameras give you and the form factor allows. The thing I really enjoy, or the stuff I really enjoy the most, is stuff like flex mode. As a YouTuber, you've got to capture content all the time. And for me, I really like having the option of capturing B-roll and having this be in flex mode and using it as its own tripod. Wherever I've got a flat surface, I've got the opportunity to capture stuff using the Flip 6. So I could put it down next to me and capture myself typing if I'm talking about the Tablet 9 Ultra and record that using the software that marries up with the hardware. Samsung allow you to capture 16:9, albeit a full HD, when it's in its portrait orientation, which is really clever because they know people want to use it in flex mode, but they also want that wider format. So they give it to you. Modes like auto framing, again, taking advantage of flex mode, the tripod, but also taking advantage of the cover screen, because you can turn on cover screen preview, and whilst you're pressing record from the inner display, turn on auto framing, and you can see yourself framed in shot on the cover screen. And the premise of auto framing is to keep yourself in frame. So it uses the ultra wide and the 1x combined to keep you in the center of frame, no matter how your sort of movements are. If you're someone that captures a lot of social content or just stuff for your own personal collection of football skills, it can be really beneficial to have this because you don't need a camera person following you around. It can just be your phone propped up on a table and you can still see yourself at the same time. I briefly spoke about it, but cover screen selfies are another great function too, because when you're out and about and you might not have many hands, you can simply fire up the camera and capture using palm selfie or even voice detection, and it will capture the photo for you and you can see yourself, and it's higher quality, as we saw before. And one that I've kind of discovered that Samsung built software for is camcorder mode, where if you pop the phone like this, you can actually get different software built into the camera app whilst you're recording video. It's kind of like the old camcorder days where you get the zooming up and down with the little lever. This is the same. They've built that into the software and it kind of makes you feel a little bit more creative. So I like it. I like the thought that Samsung give to the software to take advantage of the hardware. It's very unified. It just gives you the chance to capture things in a different way that no other phone allows you to do. No other phone. Even if you compare it to something like the S24 Ultra, it will never do what this does. From a performance standpoint, there has been significant upgrades on the Flip 6. You can hear about them in the Flip 5 versus Flip 6 video that we did up here, but I've actually started to notice the difference that these upgrades have actually allowed for. Gameplay, for example, on gaming makes it more possible to get sustained performance, even if it might still get as warm as previous generations. Because of the vapor chamber, it's actually working to keep the processor cool so it can sustain its top performance for longer compared to the top performance of the previous phone. I've played a couple of games on here. I tried Devil May Cry, and I'm not a big mobile gamer, so gaming is a bit hard for me to talk about. I'm more of a Call of Duty gamer, but I gave Devil May Cry a go and I pushed the settings all the way up to the extreme level, 120 FPS, for example, and I got some really good results. I felt really comfortable playing, and the phone didn't really give me any jitters or stutters. It just sort of played. And I actually kind of really like the wider form factor when it's open. It feels like you're on an ultra wide monitor almost, especially with Call of Duty. You're more immersed in the game and you can sort of maybe see more when you're playing. Even if you have to get used to the controls being a little bit more spaced apart, it's still nice to play. Something that I actually noticed quite a lot is the 12 gig of RAM. I didn't think I would. I thought 8 gig of RAM was probably going to be enough, but the 12 gig of RAM made for some nice upgrades when it came to things like gaming, for example. When I went to open up Call of Duty, it had maintained its spot from earlier in the day when I was playing in the morning compared to playing in the afternoon, which meant I could just jump right back into where I was without needing to load the whole game again. I noticed that very, very distinctly. And yes, you can play Call of Duty on the cover screen. You can enable that through Good Lock, which I'll talk about in a while. What also is really cool too is if you wanted to play Call of Duty on the cover screen, but you decided you wanted more room, you can open up the screen while playing and it transitions straight to the point of where you're at. Doesn't pause, doesn't exit, doesn't have to restart. That's the RAM at work. That's everything working properly, and you notice that straight away. The battery life to go with that has been great. The 4,000 mAh battery pretty much now makes it on par with S24, where you're not actually having to make sacrifices to have a flip phone anymore. When I spoke about the camera performance is the same. Now the battery matches that as well. In our usage, we've been able to get pretty much a day to a day and a half, depending on which sort of screens we're using. If we're using just the inner display, like a normal smartphone, we can push it pretty much for 24 to 36 hours, 7 hours screen on time in some cases. And for myself, I use it for the cover screen and the inner display, and I've been able to get quite extensive usage out of it, albeit it's my second phone, so I don't necessarily use it in the same way, but I've definitely been making an effort to use it a lot since I've had it. The other thing that's disappointing is the 25 watt charging. I think Samsung could have probably maybe even given us minimum 30, although in saying that, they probably would have had to develop new charging accessories just to support that. So I can understand leaving it at 25, because if you do increase the wattage, you do have to increase the size of the battery to go along with it. So I understand the hesitation to do so. Doesn't make it any less disappointing. Aside from that, everything else is great. Performance, good job. But the utility of the Z Flip 6 is what really sets this thing apart. Samsung have done really well to restrain themselves with the cover screen. There's calls out there for Samsung to put the full version of One UI on the cover screen. I disagree. I like that there's a difference, because the cover screen is quick interactions. It's quickly checking notifications. It's accessing widgets. It's scrolling through with one hand where you don't necessarily have both hands to utilize. You know, you could be wanting to browse apps at the gym. So you could open up Twitter one-handed quickly in between sets. You might want to check and browse YouTube, see if the video is worth watching. You might have some time to kill at the doctor's and you want to play some games. No, not Call of Duty. I'm talking about these little games that you can enable through this Good Lock widget inside Multistar called I Love Galaxy Foldable. This widget here, you can enable apps and you can enable games. And there's some fun little games in there, as you can see now, that really take advantage of the form factor nicely. Then there's flex mode. Flex mode, sort of that half flex state, changes how you can consume things. YouTube will build specific software so when you do put it in flex mode, you can take advantage of it in this state. Play, fast forward, scroll through the scroll wheel. It's got it there. Samsung in their infinite wisdom didn't just wait for developers to build stuff like this. They've built it themselves. If you press the little flex mode panel in the corner, which you can now move around, you'll actually notice that Samsung have built software specifically to take advantage of this. And there's options endless. You've got a touchpad, which you can interact with like a trackpad or a laptop. Brings up a little mouse in the top half and you can have little finger gestures and stuff like that. That's really cool. Bring down screenshots, notification panel, all that sort of stuff. Really neat. But the YouTube stuff is so great. It's pocket content, because it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're sitting on the couch and you just want to watch some stuff on the arm of the couch, whether you're cooking dinner and you just want to have something sitting there while you're cooking dinner to sort of keep you entertained, or even while you're working. It's a perfect little side device to sit there while you're working on something and just have some media on in the background. Flex mode panel and the flex mode allows for it. Again, with another phone, S24 Ultra, you will need a case or a stand, something extra to be able to do that. It's all built in out of the box with the Flip 6. As a wrap, the device itself doesn't change anything over the previous version in terms of how you use it. It just means all the stuff that you could do before, you can now do it better and for longer, thanks to the new battery and the better processor and the new cameras. If you like a Flip 6 or you're thinking about getting one for yourself, use the link down in the description below. Hit subscribe to SamMobile TV and go check out our written review as well. We'll leave that in the description. I'll see you next time. Thanks.